Coming up on today's episode.
These are real people that we're dealing with, people like me and you, who actually have real goals, real ambitions, right? So let's strip away the artificial exterior, and if you focus on what the client wants and where they actually want to go, break that down, spend that extra hour with them, figure out their game plan, and then move from there. And I think a lot of people don't really uncover that. They sort of just go, okay, well, yep, I know you're moving from this suburb to this suburb, great, let's push. It's like, there's a way of closing, but you've got to give them education at the same time.
Dodgy advice and bad decisions can cost you big in real estate. We're here to make sure that that doesn't happen. Welcome to the No BS Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Jo Agresta, and it's time to take control of your property journey together. Welcome back, everyone, to the No BS Real Estate Podcast, your listening how-to guide to the Aussie financial and real estate market. I'm your host, Jo Agresta, and on today's show, I have a very special guest with me. We have Seb Jean-Pierre. He's a professional real estate agent. He's been doing this for a very long time, and I need to highlight some things about our guest today. Seb has built a strong reputation in the real estate industry and is known for his transparency, genuine care for clients, and impressive results. With numerous 5-star customer reviews highlighting his attentive service, professionalism, and incredible negotiation skills, Seb is proving that great real estate agents are more than just salespeople. They're trusted advisors. He's consistently ranked high on Rate My Agent, reflecting his trust that the clients placed in him. So, what can you expect from today's episode? We'll chat to Seb about his unique approach to real estate, debunk some common myths about the industry, and share insights specifically for first home buyers and first time sellers navigating the market. Plus, Seb will tackle the head-on stigma around dodgy real estate agents and how he maintains integrity while effectively representing clients. Let's dive in. Welcome, Seb.
Great. Thank you for having me, Jo. I really appreciate it.
Of course. It's like I said, I think when I used to be a real estate agent, we've talked about this, and there has been such a stigma for such a long period of time.
Yep.
And part of today's episode, I really want to highlight the good agents that are out there. So I know I like to tease and, rip things on socials. I can do it because I used to be in it.
Of course.
But I think the minute I met you, I just realised the way you spoke about your clients, about buyers, and about the real estate process in general, I saw a true passion, and that's what resonated with me. And I thought, you know what, this is the kind of agent that I used to be. This is the kind of agent I know so few people in the industry that are like that. And I was like, no, this is, if you want an example of a good agent to use, someone that I would recommend, that's why I wanted to have you here. So
I really appreciate you having me on.
No, of course. So now kicking things off, with a little bit of a no BS fashion that we have here. So I need to know if you have maybe your funniest or strangest moment that you've experienced in real estate.
Funniest or strangest moments? I've definitely, you definitely have a few. Funniest. I find that a lot of the times when, it's obviously there's high pressure environments. I remember one time I was doing a deal and it was very tense, right? Buyers here, sellers here, right? And it got to a point in the negotiation that it was so tense obviously you're trying to secure the best result possible, but I just kind of threw in an icebreaker. I'm like, well, guys, can we just get this done, right? And it's so light, but it's also very straightforward. I was kind of, insinuating hey, this has been great, but we actually need to move forward. And in that negotiation with that icebreaker, I found that the buyer actually said, okay, well, really, Seb, I can actually go $5,000 more. And seller was like, yeah, okay, I'll take that. just by that one question, that was just so innocent in play. So that would probably be my funniest, but also kind of strange moment.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. No, I like that. Geez, a simple question just took you that far.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where sometimes when you're so used to that business chat, you just throw in that little icebreaker and it's like, oh, well, okay, well, why don't we just actually wrap this up?
Let's actually get it done.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
And I think everyone at that point when it's getting really tense, you need something to break it.
For sure.
For sure. So well done and kudos to you for throwing in a curveball that stopped everyone in their tracks. And look, Seb, I wanted to get into your story, and understand your background. So how did you end up in real estate, and, what keeps you passionate about the job?
Yeah, so I guess what sort of got me into real estate, like I was saying to you a lot earlier, I've come from the creative industry. So I was doing a lot of photography, a lot of videography when I was much younger, sort of out of school. But I always had a uncle that used to work at actually LJ Hooker in Hampton Park. So
I probably know your uncle.
Yeah, no, you probably do. But he, watching him from a very young age, I got to sort of sit alongside him, looking at how he closes deals. And I always think, wow, this guy, you know, as you are as a young kid, wow, he has a suit, wow, he has a Mercedes, and like, he's like your icon, right? So I think I've always held that high level of respect for him and sort of wanted to follow in those footsteps as well. And I think also my mum also works in property management as well.
Oh, well, so you've kind of been surrounded.
Throwing me some curveballs too. But so from a young age, I've always been surrounded by it, but how I fell into it was actually completely by accident. I was so set on, after I'm finishing school, I'm going down the creative industry route. But then obviously, you know, life happens and opportunities come. So I figured, okay, well, my family's in real estate. I've been absorbing it for about 10 years. Why don't I just try it, give it a crack? Yeah. And then from there, I've worked at a few sort of larger franchises, like I was saying. Started off as an associate or an assistant for some high performing people. And you definitely learn a lot from them. You learn what not to do, but you also learn what to do. And I think, you know, for my first job, and I'll just be completely honest with you, my first job at a larger franchise, I was actually let go. I was actually fired from my first.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So 6 months in, they just thought it wasn't a good sort of cultural fit, and I think it hurt at the time.
Of course.
It hurts. It's like, it's like a sort of a stab to your heart. But then I can wholeheartedly say, without that experience and without the person that I actually learned from, I wouldn't be where I am today. Yeah. Because he always taught me to question things and, you know, why is it this certain way, or why is the buyer saying this, why is the seller saying that? So being able to learn from someone, but also being in a bit of a tricky position where obviously you are let go, and it happens a lot in the real estate industry. Like sort of, people might not say it, people always try to maybe cover it up, but it's what happens a lot of the time as well. So that was probably my biggest lesson. And then from there, I went to another agency to finish my apprenticeship. Per se.
Fair enough.
So I did that for about 2 years, then obviously went on to become my own individual sales consultant. So yeah.
That's awesome. What a story.
Here I am, of course.
No, that's, and this is what I was saying, like what a journey to come from, you know, that first experience, right, of being fired. And I think we've all been there where we've either been let go of jobs or, you know, maybe we didn't make it through a probation period, different stuff, right? Happens all the time. Happens all the time. Yeah. But if you use that experience to build resilience and push through it, it makes a huge, like, look at you now. If you had have let that experience stop you at that point, it would have been all over. You wouldn't have been a real estate agent. Maybe you would have gone down the creative path if it hurt you that much.
Exactly.
So, you know, good on you for, you know, persevering and then coming out the other side.
No, of course. And I think I just vividly remember that day. You know how it is, like in corporate settings, they're very stern. And I remember jumping on the phone to my mum, being in shambles. I'm like, Mum, this is what's happened. I feel like naturally at that point in time, especially coming from an ethnic household, you kind of feel like you let your family down situation. But, you know, I still remember the feeling. I'm starting to get that feeling now. It was like fire. It was like, okay, well, you know, I haven't made it here, but what's next for me? Yeah. And within a week, I had already found somewhere else to work.
Good on you.
Because that same day I made a phone call and I'm like, all right, great. This is what's happened to me. How do we pivot? You know, because I think that in life, Joe, I think success is not by how many times you win, but how many times you encounter failure, but push through. Yeah. And push through.
No, that's very sage advice. Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. And I believe that too.
Exactly. This is something that, you know, I do want to obviously touch about, is also like the culture of real estate. Like, you know, you've been a real estate agent yourself, and not always the most happiest environments. And I felt that everywhere that I've worked, it didn't do it for me. Like, you know, you're either pushing clients for KPIs for yourself, for their brand, or you're either just, I don't know, it just, nothing really felt right.
You know, I think coming from real estate, as you said, I couldn't agree more. It's very dog eat dog.
For sure.
And it is, people undercut you left and right.
Oh yeah, all the time.
And when you have morals or ethics, it's frustrating.
It's super hard.
And that sense of injustice really fuels your personality, right?
Does. Yeah.
You know, touching on and leaning into that theme of, like you said, real estate has a certain brand and reputation. And there's a lot of skepticism, like I said at the start, with agents in general being pushy or dishonest.
Of course.
And, you know, why do you think, or where do you think this image comes from? And how do you personally handle this perception when you're working with your clients?
It's funny that you say that, because it's similar to what I was saying to you before, Joe. It's how it's perceived, you know. And, you know, at the end of the day, yes, like it is, you know, to some degree it is suits and nice cars, right? But that's just the exterior, right? The way I kind of see it, Joe, is these are real people that we're dealing with, people like me and you, who actually have real goals, real ambitions, right? So let's strip away the artificial exterior, and if you focus on what the client wants and where they actually want to go, break that down, spend that extra hour with them, figure out their game plan, and then move from there. And I think a lot of people don't really uncover that. They sort of just go, okay, well, yep, I know you're moving from this suburb to this suburb, great, let's push. It's like, there's a way of closing, but you've got to give them education at the same time. It's not just take, it's also give. You know? It's like you give 4 times before you ask for one thing. That's kind of how I look at it. And you know, like I said, you don't always win all the clients, right? No. And you know that, being in the industry yourself. But my whole thing is like quality over quantity, you know? I would rather have 20 solid clients than 40 clients. 20 of them don't even like me half the time, but I got the job done. 10 of them might like me and 5 really like me. I'd rather have those 20 people who obviously, you know,
like you,
you get referrals from that as well. So I think the biggest thing is it's just being too pushy without actually understanding the client. You know, they've got their own life, they've got kids, maybe they've had deaths in their family. So being able to be empathetic, but also get to the objective at the same time, you know?
I think that's solid. Like, you know, it's important to understand the people that you're working with. Like you said, it's such a personal journey when you're buying property. So uncovering that why and that reasoning is super important. You know, you've mentioned that you prioritize transparency. How does this transparency, you know, play out practically when you're representing sellers in particular?
So that's a really good question, Joe. Let's go through, let's actually cut the noise. All right, what do people actually want? So I think by giving the sellers what they actually need rather than what we think they need is super important. Like, it could be, instead of withholding, you know, comparable sales where we know, it's like, all right, let's give you 10 comparable sales instead of 5 ones that we think. So that way you can get a holistic view of what's actually selling, you know? Because obviously, you know, vendors, they all want their certain prices, right? But we need to be able to be responsible as professionals to say, I understand that's what you want, here's the data that actually supports that. So giving them the whole view rather than a sort of compartmentalized view. That helps a lot.
And I think that's fair. You know, data's super important. Data doesn't lie, I always say.
Exactly.
You're looking at it, you can see it. Now then it becomes, you know, a personal opinion of whether you want to persist or not, you know, with a certain price. And I think what I'm seeing it play out in the market, and this is more of a question of market update, how is this market currently treating you? Because I'm finding myself, like with a lot of buyers coming in, there's still not a lot of stock, but there's obviously a bit of pressure on the sellers as well because they're not getting their asking prices, because buyers are coming in lower, or they're, you know, maybe playing the field a little bit. What's your current perception of the market and how things are playing out, you know, this first half of the year so far?
Look, from a team sort of perspective, Joe, I know that we're still clearing some good properties, right? I think we've only had one that's been withdrawn, if I'm just being completely transparent. We've been clearing our stock pretty like fast.
Nice.
That comes down to pricing. Pricing and vendor expectations, but also how we present the properties. Instead of just snapping up all the photos, let's pull things out. Let's move the teddy bears. Let's move the bed around. Let's present it in a way where it creates that transparency and trust for the buyers to walk through. They feel like they're not walking through a bloody bomb shack. When really it's a nice house. So what we're finding is a lot of my clients, the ones that I've listed and the ones that boys have listed, they're all people who've had existing problems for the last year, right? They're wanting to move, but they never had that sort of push to be able to, you know, do all that. So no, that's fair. And I think you know, with the selling side, it's so interesting, and I want to kind of understand for the listeners as well, because we do have a lot of first-time sellers or people that are trying to do the simultaneous buy and sell at the same time. What's a typical process look like for you, like from the day that someone inquires with you and says, I want to sell my house? You know, what are the steps and what's your process to getting them, you know, looked after? So do you mean looked after in the terms of like a end-to-end?
Like the process and the steps in between. So, you know, maybe take it from appraisal.
Sure. So what I typically do and what's worked really well for me, Joe, is, you know, whether they call up or whether I book the appointment, you always ask them pre-qualifying questions before you come out. Because you obviously want to know, all right, well, you want to gauge where they're at prior to you coming, right? A lot of the times, to the ones that we've already pre-qualified, we go in, we'll do a tour of the house, and it's just setting that agenda. It's saying, hey, you know, this is what the appraisal is going to look like. We're just going to do a tour of the house, and we're going to have a chat about market conditions, and then just really not being really robotic about it, but just giving them a roadmap instead of just walking in and say, oh, I think your house is worth this. When it's, all right, this is what we're going to cover, and this is what it's going to be like. So that way, from the get-go, we're taking them away from just price in terms of process now. So it's like, this is the roadmap. Don't just listen to people who are just walking in and telling you what you want to hear. This is how I'm going to get you to what I want to hear. So it goes from an appraisal, then, you know, if we don't get them obviously on the spot, we'll go down the proposal route, send them a proposal, and then obviously follow up from there. Sometimes they're like, great, let's just move forward. So appraisal, we'll book the photos, we'll get the Section 32 organized. Then I always do a pre-market meeting. So once the photos are done, we'll go through the photos together.
Okay.
And say, great, these are the things that are really going to come into play. Before we go on the market, these are the couple of things that I want to cover. So every touch point before we go on the market, you know, and then obviously when we're on the market, we have meetings at each stage.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously your vendor reports, and then once we get offers, we do the negotiations, and then we time up the settlement. So there's a lot that goes into it. If I had to go end to end, I think we're going to be here for
I can imagine
6 hours, because I'm probably, if I'm honest, I'm probably a little bit more thorough than the typical, just because I want to cover obviously my base, so that way they can trust me from the end to end.
End to end makes sense too.
Yeah.
And like you're right, there are so many steps.
So many.
I think one of the things that, you know, a lot of people say, oh, why would I use an agent? Maybe I'll do it myself. And I think that's when they end up with an agent sometimes, because they realise how much work actually goes into preparing a home for sale is one thing that usually falls on the owner. Yeah. So if they can't afford to do staging, they usually have to do something themselves, like do cleaning and then moving things around and trying to make it work.
Yeah, of course.
And the agent plays such a big role.
Humongous.
You know, and I always say this for the same with the buyer market, right? It's like we have real estate agents when you want to sell your home, and that's such an important key in the success of your home, getting a higher price or a lower price or a market price. But then on the reverse side for buyers, and I want to touch on this with you and how you handle it, with buyers, they don't typically engage an agent to purchase, right? They exist. Buyers advocates definitely exist. We've interviewed, you know, heaps of them on this podcast, but not a lot of people engage them. So then they take the, you know, opportunity to do it by themselves. And that's where I see a lot of pitfalls and mistakes.
Massive disconnect as well.
Correct, right? And I've always had really good relationships with real estate agents, because we're tying the knots together,
absolutely.
You know, and our negotiations tend to be really easy, and the communication. Correct. There's a respect. It's, you know, I'm not going to go for all the, you know, fluff around it. Just tell me what the vendor wants and we can negotiate, right?
Exactly.
And I've always had a great experience with agents from this side of the coin, but I know buyers who come in and have their horror stories and say, you know, I had an agent that said, do you have pre-approval? I said no. They just stopped talking to me for the rest of the open. And I'm like, how interesting. And I said, you know, these are the kind of little experiences I hear about, and I'm like, I know not all agents are like this, because I wouldn't have turned you away. I would have said, oh, let me refer you to a broker we've got.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, help you out.
For sure.
So, you know, turning to our first home buyers, what are some of the common missteps that you see them make, and what practical advice would you offer them to prevent this stuff, especially if they're doing it by themselves? Yeah,
so I think, you know, definitely if they're doing it by themselves, I think it's just getting really real about what their expectations are. I think, you know, especially a lot of first-time buyers, you've been there, I've been there. You know, it's all well and good to scroll realestate.com looking for $2-3 million properties. Really, our budget's like $600,000-$700,000. So I think it's just about getting super clear on about what it is that we actually want. And I think one tip that I can really offer, obviously the first-time buyers, is have a list of needs and wants. You know, what do we absolutely need? All right, we know we've got 3 dogs, we've got 15 kittens. We need a big open living plan, or we need a big backyard. That is a non-negotiable, right? I'm not willing to separate with my dogs and my pets for the sake of a house. So what do you need? What do you want? Oh, we really want Smeg appliances. Well, in your particular price point, you actually probably couldn't get that. But that's okay. Could we maybe buy this property first and you can upgrade later? Once you obviously get some equity, you can refinance, you can upgrade all the appliances. So it's just about having that clear-cut needs and wants and being really real. You know, whether you're doing it as a spouse, whether you're doing it sort of as a single by yourself, just get really real about what is it that actually matters to you.
I love that. Yeah. That's something that even a Bodhi, you know, we focus on very heavily. So could not agree more. And makes it clear for you. So, and does that help you in your transactions and dealings with buyers when they come in? Like what do you think is a good buyer scenario for you? Where you're like, oh, this buyer actually knows their stuff. They're very reasonable. Do you ever really encounter that or not really? Yeah,
so I think like also depends on obviously, you know, what type of properties. I know that you know, like when I've sold a few properties on my favorite types of buyers is the ones when you sort of sell the higher end properties. Because these people are coming in like, all right, Seb, I'm not mucking around. This is my budget. I need something to sell. This is what I want to be. I understand that I can't get this in this particular price point. If I can't get this, can you help me? Like they're very receptive. They're very open. They know their budget and they're sticking to it. They're not blowing sort of past that, because that then creates problems on the other side of the coin too, you know?
And I feel like there's this, there's always been a barrier, and I found this when I was in real estate, where people, you could tell they were being guarded with you about telling you stuff. And it makes back then I used to think this is making it so hard for me because I actually don't know how to guide you because I don't know what you're saying is true.
Of course.
Right? So then there's this reluctance of a customer trying to tell you what they want and say, look, I want to buy this house because of this and this is my max budget. Everyone's told them all this information. Their parents, their friends have said, don't talk to the agent about this, don't talk to the agent about that, don't tell them anything. And then they come into an open and they're mute. Whereas on my side of the coin, whether it's I've been an agent or a buyer's agent, I'm like, ask crap loads of questions.
100%.
You have to. And it's not a bad thing to tell the real estate agent where you're at because they're going to help you to secure that next thing, to secure the property, you build rapport. And I find that when agents really like you as a buyer and they connect with you, they end up trying to work for you just as much as they're working for the vendor.
And that's exactly what I was going to say to you. I think, if you took a scenario of buyer A versus buyer B, if buyer A is mute, they're not talking to you, they're very direct and blunt because they have a preconceived opinion of how you're going to sort of treat them, as opposed to buyer B is like, look, this is where I'm at, I need help buying a house, can you help me? Right? Because, and I think as humans, we always value that honest approach, and once we drop, excuse my French, but we drop the crap, people are actually inclined to help you more. And I find that with the buyers who, they drop the guard and like, look, Seb, this is where I'm at. Realistically, I can't go anything past that. Can you help me? I'll be like, great. Personally, I'll say to the buyer, look, this home might not be suitable for you, but let's find something else for you. And that way, a lot of the times they'll subscribe to the email list or, I'll ring them up about an off market and take them through and they end up buying it sometimes. So it's just about sort of, obviously they need to feel comfortable with you to some degree. I think that's important, but in the times they don't, just try and facilitate that environment for them if they're not willing to open up.
No, I really like that. And like I said, it comes out in the way you're talking about it, So I really value that about how you approach real estate and buyers in particular. And, this is like, I guess, story-wise and an experience, have you got, a time where you can recall that you've worked super hard and it was maybe a really hard sale like that had to go through like a challenging story, but you got a really good result for your seller or you got a really good result for a buyer?
So do you remember how early on I was telling you about how I how I got let go from my first job?
Yes.
So funny story. So when I rolled into the next job the week after, and you can talk about universe, you can talk about God, whatever it is, right, that the viewers might believe in. I actually got a call from a client of a friend of mine, right? He said, Seb, I'm selling. I was like, oh, okay, like funny, I just got let go, I got into a new job, great, I need leads. Anyway, so he calls me out and I'm doing my research on the property. I'm like, oh, but the property, it's like a 2-acre property, like it's quite big. I'm like, yeah, I'm selling. I'm like, cool, I'll come over. Go to the house, we get along because we obviously have a little bit of rapport and history, and obviously being the way I am, throw the icebreakers in there. And we ended up listing it and it was I actually sold that for 2.7 mil.
Oh, far out, well done.
Yeah, and that was me still being an associate. I wasn't even a fully fledged consultant. And then funnily enough, while he actually talked me up to the next door neighbor. So the next door neighbor was actually selling as well. She was like 92. She was like, her husband passed away. She wanted to sell at the same time because she didn't want to be living with a stranger on the next block. So in that transaction, because I was very, just obviously myself, break the ice, but also deliver the information, I actually got listed both properties and actually sold both. So if I think about it, it's like 7 months in my real estate journey, I've already sold.
Your commission would have been fine. You wouldn't have even had a retainer.
I was an associate at the time, so I didn't receive all of it. But it was I know it sucks. But the guy who helped me at the time, he was really good. He gave me a little bit more than the average sort of thing. So we worked that out well. But from being in the industry for only 7 months at that time, to have that as your profile, it's a pretty big thing. And the neighbors look around. I think at the time there was maybe 4 other ones for sale, didn't move, and still on the market to this day.
Wow.
And I'm still in touch with those people.
Jeez,
really? Yeah, because they remember you, because nothing sells in that pocket.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if you know, it's near Cranbourne, Collison Road.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, no, that's tough as hell.
Yeah, they're hard. They're hard to move, but I don't know what it was. I think it's just timing, if I'm honest with you, Joe.
Yeah.
But also, it just goes to show that you just do the right thing. Good things happen, Joe.
Yeah. No, I think, look, and hard work, obviously.
Of course,
you know, it's always going to get you there. You've got the right contacts, and leveraging your network in this business is number one. Like, I think all of my first clients, even when I started a Bodhi or in real estate, all came from family, friends, and word of mouth referrals, and that's a huge part of our business, right? So, no, kudos to you. I think that's a great story, and you got a good result, especially getting the second listing. And that's obviously what happens a lot of the time. You do see it when you see a street that has, you know, an O'Brien's board, then you see another O'Brien's board, and then it kind of flows on. It creates
like a kind of perception, and I think that's kind of how I feel like it relates to you a lot as well with you, because obviously, like we were mentioning before the podcast, well, you're working all sorts of hours. Similar to me, we don't clock in.
No.
We just kind of like, all right, we wake up, we work, and then we're sort of out. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to wrap up, you know, Seb, this has been such a good chat. I think this is super valuable for all our, you know, first-time sellers or first-time buyers listening who have a different view of real estate agents. I hope this has debunked a lot for them, and, you know, knowing who they can get in touch with, number one.
Yeah.
But two, you know, I want to ask the final question here. What's one clear signal buyers can watch out for to quickly determine whether an agent is trustworthy or perhaps less so? What's a tell that even you pick up on when you meet other agents?
So, time to time, I go by my friend. He works in real estate in like Melbourne, Hawthorne area, and he always just says, "All right, come during the week. Let's just have a look through the open homes." So he kind of goes in like undercover,
right?
And I go with him undercover, right? And just seeing how, you know, like from a buying perspective, how they can treat you if they don't like you, or if they kind of have preconceived opinions about you. And I always think like, it's access to public information. Like, if they don't know the basics, they don't know what's sold in the area, they don't know what's listed, they don't know about the property, it's the biggest disconnect with the buyers. Because they're thinking, well, if I'm a buyer and you don't know that, well then who do I get the information from? How can I make an informed decision? So that's probably the biggest disconnect that I see, the agent not actually knowing all facets of the property. You know, super important, because it's like, you need to know the land size, you need to know if there's restrictions on the property, you need to know what's sold in the area. You know, there's been so many times where, you know, I've listed a property and they're like, oh, that one sold down the road. Oh, so number 52, the one that was going through a divorce. So, so that's the reason why that sold for lower. So it's like, it's about having that market knowledge and knowing and taking the time to learn. Like, you know, I'm sure you're the same with a Bodhi. You're always researching until late in the morning, and it doesn't hurt to take that extra hour in your day to if you're listing a property, the vendor needs to know, does my agent actually know what's going on? Because then if I don't create a seamless experience for the buyer,
no one's going to buy it.
They're not going to buy it, and they're not going to give a good price. So it's like, how do you do that? By being informed, and giving the right information is crucial.
No, that's a great answer. And I've always said that that's my tell. As soon as I've done the same thing, I like to still go undercover sometimes. And that's the first thing I notice is, when was the house built? I don't know. It's like, what do you mean?
It's like, no, it's like you actually need to know that. And I think where it ties really well, obviously, into what you're doing with the Bodhi, you know, you're sort of getting all that information, essentially, and giving it to the buyers. So how do you feel that will help buyers in the long run?
Look, I think buyers need to be informed, and I think the challenge is that buyers advocates exist in market, and there's a barrier to entry with the price point, right? And when I say a barrier, buyers don't necessarily have that barrier when it comes to selling their home.
Of course.
But I think when the idea hits both pockets at the same time, where they'd have a buyer's advocate to help them buy and a real estate agent to help them sell, it becomes too much, right? And it's not something they're used to. So the purpose of a Bodhi is to bring them all this information in, you know, the palm of their hand, so that they can actually see a property, get the details they need, and make an informed decision. That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
you said
informed decisions, exactly.
Because they have no idea if I don't tell you, or the agent doesn't tell you. And this is to kind of, you know, battle that exact problem we're talking about, is some agents don't know stuff about the property. So what does the buyer do, and where does the buyer go to get that information? And realestate.com is a great platform for some basic information and, you know, different calculators, but what we're focused on is personalized data. So we don't just give you the data, we're actually telling you, why is it a good fit for you? Why is it not a good fit?
Yeah, exactly right.
We'll actually tell you how to compromise on it and say, look, you said you wanted all these things. We found the top 5 properties, but here's this one little piece of resistance that you might need to consider whether you want to buy it or not. And we ask about all those things. So
exactly. And I think from the moment that we met, I think that was always the most key thing. I was so excited, if you remember. I was like, I like what you're doing. Let's obviously work something out, because I thought, like, great, that's something that's good for buyers, because I have friends that, you know, they might not, you know, be ready to buy, or they might not be ready to come to me for advice. So I'm like, well, here's the app, go through that, see what you think, have a bit of a play around with it.
When I met you and you were so excited by it, that was when I knew this is not ego.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of agents I meet or speak to are very quick to crap on it.
100%.
Right?
100%.
Because they're like, nah, you don't, that's not going to work. And I'm like, you're saying that because
you have
you're worried they're going to have too much. Right?
And the biggest thing and what I think the viewers will benefit from is obviously, I think a lot of agents, they sort of look at people and look at things like a straight tunnel vision.
Yeah.
It's like, hang on a second, if you actually open up your view, how can it benefit you, right?
Yeah.
How can you utilize it? How can a buyer utilize it? Because if they're getting the right information, don't you sell the property quicker?
Correct.
Don't they buy quicker? So don't you get paid quicker? Like, if you want to appeal to the ego agent, well, that's how you can frame it too. So there's so many ways on how you can sort of pitch it. And at the end of the day, like, that's why I was obviously attracted to the idea and sort of what you're doing as well.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks for flipping the script.
Of course, no, I needed to. Yeah.
But no, it's so good. This has been such a passionate
Definitely.
chat, and I really enjoyed it. And Seb, last thing, like, all this information, it's so valuable. Of course, we're going to put all of the links and everything to your site and your contact details where people can get in touch. But before we finish up, what's the best way for listeners to get in touch?
So you can obviously, you can ring me, 0426 209 398. Yeah, I'm always floating around. I always believe in a sort of holistic approach where, you can get in touch with me anyway, so.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again, everyone. That is the episode today for the No BS Real Estate Podcast. So don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us. Subscribe, listen to me. But follow us for more tips and insider advice on navigating Australia's property market. We'll catch you next time on the No BS channel. That's a wrap for this episode of the No BS Real Estate Podcast, powered by Abode AI. If you found this conversation helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who might need it. If you're looking for more guidance on your home buying journey, you can visit www.abode.com.au for expert advice, property insights, and the tools you need to find the right home with confidence. If you're already on your journey, you can also download our app. Just search Abode AI on the App Store or Google Play. Have any questions or want to connect, you can follow us on Instagram at abode.com.au or send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.